Hi, I am Katina Horton, the Love and Freedom Toxic Relationship Recovery Coach. And today we are going to talk about two ways that trauma bonds reinforce attachment to the narcissist and narcissistic systems. And before I get started, I just want to remind you that we wear a tie so we can make an impact, right? That means we're analyzing, we're troubleshooting, we are implementing, we are empowering so we can make an impact. And that means that if it's anything in this video that's of value to you, if you can hit the like button, and if you can also share the video with friends, family members, co-workers, sisters and brothers in Christ, etc. Once again, today's message is two ways trauma bonds reinforce attachment to the narcissist and narcissistic systems, right? And so one of the hardest things for us to think about is, that you may ask yourself is like, why did I stay at this job for so long? Why did I stay at this church for so long when over time it was obvious that I was unhappy, that I was miserable, blah, 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 right? And so the main reason that this occurred is because of trauma bonding. Okay. And then when it comes to trauma bonding and narcissistic systems, there are two ways that trauma bonding occurs. Okay. And the first way is you have what I call a breadcrumb reward system, right? That means you are underpaid and you are overworked. You're working long hours, right? Extremely long hours under hard conditions. And that means, and you're also expected to work overtime. It's just a given. It's like, well, don't even ask me if you have to stay overtime today. You just know, you just expect to work overtime, right? And then you're also usually in conditions where you have little to no help at all. Okay. And then what happens is the breadcrumbing reward system comes in where, in the midst of all of that, you have moments where your supervisors and our management, the management team basically will hand out gift cards. You get gas gift cards, you get gift cards to Best Buy, gift cards to Walmart, gift cards to Kohl's, gift cards for lunch and for dinner, and or the corporation might actually order out, right? And you got food for lunch, and you've got sometimes they might even treat you to having dinner there at the job. So it's not just that you're working all of these extremely long hours, that you're without help and working under hard conditions. It's that this trauma bond, which, like I said, is two different ways. And the first one is the breadcrumb reward system. So the trauma bond is what is keeping you in that vicious cycle, so to speak, of staying at this particular corporation and or church longer than you need to be, right? And it's like what ends up happening is that you start feeling bad for expressing to your friends about what's going on at work, to your family members. It could be friends, family members, right? Your romantic partner. It could be other sisters and brothers in Christ, right? Your ministry partners or whatever. You start feeling bad about talking about how harsh this whole situation is. And then you start thinking, but you're in slavery conditions, right? And you don't even really know it. You can't put your finger on it. You don't have a name for it. And so what happens is that it's easier when we are, I guess I would say, in an overt situation, because when abuse is overt, it's just flat right out in your face. It's not even like, I wonder what this person was trying to do. No, it's obvious, right? But when it's covert, okay, when you have narcissistic systems that's covert, it's trickier to pinpoint what exactly is going on. Something doesn't feel right. You can't put your finger on it, like I said, and you've got all of these slavery conditions in place, but you still can't put your finger on, you can't quite put your finger on what's going on. You notice changes within yourself, right? Within your thinking, within your body. You're getting all of these different sensations because remember now, the body keeps the score, but you just can't quite put your finger on like what's going on. Something just don't feel right, but I don't know what it is. That type of thing, right? And what happens in the covert narcissistic system, the people in charge are very slick. You see what I'm saying? It's like it's baked in, like you make a lasagna and you sneak some ingredients in there and everybody is eating it and they're trying to figure out like there's something in here, but I don't know what it is. And then they just keep eating it. It's some type of ingredient that's in the lasagna that makes them want to just keep eating and eating and eating a lasagna. So that's how I would describe it when you have a covert narcissistic system that's a place where it could be a job, it could be a church, it could even be a small group right from church. When you have that type of system, you want to keep eating and eating and eating. And there's an ingredient that's in there, but you can't pinpoint what it is. But you can't help yourself because you keep eating and eating because of the trauma bond, right? And so in this one book, it's called When Narcissism Comes to Church, and it's by Chuck DeGroat. It's really good. He says there's three things that's in place when you've got a narcissistic system. And he speaks of control, shame, and then the third one would be structure, right? And then what I want to say for myself is that underneath structure, there are three things going on, right? There's being undervalued, you are underpaid, and you are underutilized, meaning that they might have you in one department or one ministry where your gifts, talents, skills, ability, intellect, etc., would be better used in a different department and or ministry, right? But instead of them looking at it like that, it's like that competition thing. They don't want you to go too much higher than themselves, right? So they stick you in a department and or ministry that you will probably never get out of, okay? And so what happens is when it comes to the control part of that, right? Because I said there's three things he mentions: control, shame, and structure. When it comes to the control part, what it is they want your desk a certain way. They want everybody going to lunch at the same time. They want not only your desk set a certain way, they want you to do things a certain way. And there might be a system to getting things done. However, because we are all uniquely designed, right, and created and wired differently, we might have different ways of getting that end result. But they force you to think in like a clone slash, I guess I would say, utopian society type of thing, right? And so we got all of this going on with this control system, right? And so then, of course, running the show is the sin of certainty. And certainty becomes sin when you think that there's only one way to do something, right? And we've talked about this before. As I said, my grandmother, when she was living, she had a certain figure of speech, and she would say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So when we have a sin of certainty, we think in our heads, right? There's only one way to do something, and it's my way or it's the highway, right? And so that also means that sin of certainty is setting us up for being legalistic and carrying around what I would call a Holy Spirit box, so to speak, right? And so what ends up happening is they control you and control you and control you. And what they are hoping to do is to break you down, or at least to try to break you down, right? To keep doing things to try to break you down in this process, I guess I would say the controlling slavery process, so to speak, right? So they're either going to break you down or they're going to try their best to get you broken down, okay? And they're going to try a number of things to do that. And so either you've got one person trying to break you down so they can control you, or you've got another supervisor who comes along, supervisor and or lead pastor, remember, because this is church, or it could be your job, or it can be any other organization or small group, okay? When it comes to a narcissistic system, it can even be a family, right? So what happens is that if you don't have the control going on, then you've got someone that's shaming you nonstop. Whenever you do something wrong, they have to make a big showcase of it, right? You make a mistake and they're bringing 5 or 6 other elders in on it, on something that could have actually been handled between you and the pastor, but he has to make a spectacle. He or she has to make a spectacle of it by bringing 5 or 6 other elders in. And you see what she did? And it might not even be anything that's a big deal. You see what I'm saying? And in the workplace, it's the same thing. Your supervisor has to bring 5 or 6 other supervisors in on it and have them to come over and to look at your work for something that just could have been handled between you and her. But see, he or she has been baked into the narcissistic system. And so either they're controlling, right? Or they're shaming. It's all, remember, it's always about power and control, right? And like I said, the growth says control, shame, and structure. Those three things are part of narcissistic systems. Okay. And so what happens when it comes to being shamed, the error is usually related to something that really shouldn't be done in the first place. It's really an error that anyone could have made when it comes to whatever they're shaming you about. However, they've been so trained and brainwashed that they make a big deal out of anything. And so either it's something that shouldn't be done anyway, right? Or something that they've been doing for so long that they can't think of any other way to change it. They figure in their minds, and their, I guess I would say, rationale for it would be the customer wants it, and or this is what the church members want. Not thinking in man, like, is this a good idea to continue this system in the first place? You right, continue having this product there, continue providing this service. So that's usually what it is when it comes to shaming. It's usually something that everybody has made an error with, and they need to actually either train the people, or something that really shouldn't be done, because it's like a lot of different factors into either making that product or providing that service, if that makes sense, right? When it comes to the church, okay? And so then you might wonder, okay, the third thing that Chuck DeGroat mentions is the structure. So what about the structure? For me, it's like whatever, no matter what it is you do, no matter what you say, no matter how much value you give to the company and or church, there will never be any promotions. Okay? So just let that sink in. No matter what you do, you are not going to be promoted. You thought you were heading up to the worship team, you thought you were heading over to the pastoral team. It ain't happening. You see what I'm saying? If you at a job and you thought you were going to the next level of being in the higher level IT department, you thought you were going to the next level where you were in the marketing department, but it was like a slash two, so to speak, where you're at a higher level of marketing and doing more branding and business messaging, that type of thing for corporations, for the top high level corporations, and you've got the training and all of this for it. It's not happening. That's where the structure comes in. They set up things in place. There are systems in place to block you from any kind of promotion at all. Okay. And so what happens is in these systems as well, as far as the structure goes, what's orally said, right? And what's written on paper, those two, they match. They're congruent. However, they are incongruent with the actions of the supervisors and management. And sometimes it takes a while before you catch on to what's really going on. If that makes any sense. So sometimes some people catch on right away, and then it might take other people a long time to catch on. This is the structure here. This is not going to change. So if you're going to work here, either you work up under this narcissistic system or you're going to have to leave. You see what I'm saying? And so what happens is, like I said, the structures that are in place, whether it's at church or at the job, is to keep certain people in certain places. The people who are possibly moved on, but a lot of times they're not. They just might be given a different title in the same department or in the ministry department that you are in. However, if they're moved on, you best believe that there is a price they are going to have to pay. It's like the King Saul and David type of thing, right? Saul, it's going to be a Saul that's after them, right? Because that toxic jealousy and that seed of insecurity cannot stand for someone else who is doing the same thing they're doing, right? Or even doing something different. They cannot stand for that individual, the other individual, to be getting more accolades, more followers, to have more ministries that they're involved in. You see what I'm saying? And also, if you're doing something outside of the church or outside of the job, those people that have that toxic jealousy, which in turn turns over into envy, they can't handle that. It's like, no, what do you mean you're doing something else? What do you mean you got a life outside of this place, this organization? This organization is supposed to be your life, so to speak, right? And so what happens is you have to pass the slavery test. So those who pass the slavery test, those are the individuals who are made to feel special, right? And then they take on the culture of narcissism. They take on the spirit of narcissism, right? And then for those people who do not pass the slavery test, those are the ones that's placed in a future faking pile. And then you might think, future faking pile, what do you mean by that? Think about it. When you get ready to wash your clothes and you separate, you might have all of the jackets that are washable in one pile. You're going to have the linen in another pile. You're going to have the whites in another pile. You're going to have the darks in another pile, right? And for each of these piles, there's going to have to be different treatment involved. If you think about it like that, right? And then you got what? You got the treatment is going to be based upon the temperature of the water, and then you got the length of time for the wash, right? And then you got the kind of detergent. So it's the same way when it comes to these narcissistic systems in churches, jobs, and any other organizations and small groups, etc. Right? You got that future faking power. So if the people that don't pass the slavery test, they are put in a future faking power, because what that means is that they're going to keep future faking you. When I say they, I'm talking about the lead pastor, lead small group leader, right? And the lead supervisor, or either the person that's in charge of management over that department, whoever's in charge, the director of that department, they're going to keep future faking you about moving up in the company, right? Moving up to another ministry team at the church. They're just going to keep future faking and future faking and future faking, okay? Now, the problem with this is, to me, when it comes to the narcissistic systems, this is where the emotional, they start to show the cracks. I guess I would say that. That's the problem with the narcissistic systems, is because the emotional intelligence is low. And so that emotional intelligence being low starts to manifest the cracks of the system, right? And one of the cracks is, how do you go and future fake 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old adults, right? Using the same manner as you would do if you're talking to children. If you got preschoolers in the classroom and you tell them, as soon as you finish eating your lunch, then you can go over there to the table with Miss Davis and she's going to pass out the what is that, the cookies, right? And then you might even say, okay, as soon as you finish whatever assignment you've given them to do, you can go over into the play area, right? Or as soon as you finish whatever, then you can stand in line, you can line up for recess. You see what I'm saying? Or get some type of special treat. So when it comes to these narcissistic systems, the cracks show in these systems because of the fact that there's a lack of emotional intelligence with the people who are in charge, if that makes sense. And those cracks, right, are really showing that, like, I'm treating older adults, 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old adults, as if they're even younger than preschoolers who understand what it means that you're going to be the next person in line. So what happens is, those individuals who don't pass the slavery test, they get put in a future fake pile, right? Like the clothing we're washing. And then as soon as you go to the supervisor and say, you know what, I really like this company, I really like this church. What is it that I can do as far as getting myself up to a higher level, to be in this ministry next? You see what I'm saying? To be in this department, to move over to marketing two, or IT technician two. What can I do in order to improve myself? And they give you a list of things and tell you that they want to see these type of numbers, these type of point systems, all your ducks in a row. And then what happens is, you follow through with what it is that they have told you. And guess what? You're still not moved up. Mind you, you see 3 or 4 other church members move to that department, that moved to that ministry, rather, that you were waiting on, but you were told you were the very next one in line. Same thing at the workplace, right? You see 3 or 4 other employees who have been promoted to the marketing 2 department, to the IT 2 department. Then you're thinking to yourself, if you are a person that struggles with worth, you can start thinking to yourself, well, man, I wonder, what is it with me? What am I not doing that I'm not getting promoted? It's got to be something. I know I got my numbers up. I come in on time. I volunteer and work overtime. I understand what's going on. Why am I not being promoted? You see what I'm saying? It starts messing with your brain, right? And then when you mention it to the other co-workers who have been promoted, the other church members who have been promoted, they start to say this whole little script. They start up the script, just as I talked about before, as far as a romantic relationship. When the woman has been in a narcissistic, abusive relationship so long, and you've got her friends who are trying to convince her to get out of it, she will start talking about how her husband is a hard worker, and how he takes care of the kids, and how he's a good provider, and how they've got $1 million saved up, in investments and in bank accounts, and how they've got 5 and 6 cars, and how they've got a good house. And so she will start this whole script to help her to stay in magical thinking land and to be able to survive it. And so everybody in the workplace, of course, they also have their own script. You see what I'm saying? They will start telling you about how, oh, this is $1 million company. This company is making 6 figures. This is a multi-billion, multi-million-dollar company. And don't even realize that this is the script that you've been given, so to speak, that's been baked in so that you can believe, because of you having low worth, this is what I deserve to be here from some and have this treatment that I'm receiving, right? This is what I deserve. And that's how you know when you've been in something too long, whether it's romantic or you're working in ministry at a church or at some other organization. You've been there too long. When you have the script that you have to tell yourself in order to make yourself stay at that particular company and or church or in a certain small group. But this is a mega church, and they've saved 20,000 souls. But it don't matter how many souls that's been saved. The church is toxic. You see what I'm saying? It don't matter how much money this company is making. The company is toxic, and or the department is toxic, which after a while, if it started down low, it's going to go all the way up. Because usually what happens when you got toxicity, the system starts with the highest person up there and comes down. And if it's not a thing where it starts all the way up at the top and comes down, it's all the way up at the top of that department and has come down to everybody working under that person, if it makes sense. And then those departments spread it over to other departments, right? And you always know how a company and or church is, how they really are, when you look at how they treat their people that they would consider, so to speak, the low man on the totem pole. You really know how they are when they start to treat those individuals a certain kind of way. Okay. And so what happens is that, like I said, they future fake you, they future fake, right? And then after a while, you can either one or two things going to happen. You will probably either get sucked into that future faking, right? And you're in a hamster wheel, still trying to figure out what what you need to do. You're striving and striving, or you're at the point where you've had a come to Jesus moment, and you know that if you don't get out of there, it's going to lead to like stagnancy in your whole life, just being at that place. And you might think, well, how in the world will that end up happening? Stagnancy can be so sneaky and creep up on you that it can literally paralyze you. You see what I'm saying? Whenever it's involving a situation where your worth is based upon what somebody else is saying, as far as what they think of it. So when you make that an idol, instead of what God says, when we make that an idol instead of what it is that God says about us, we're falling right in line with that baked in narcissistic system that's going on, right? And so what happens is that, like I said, you're in that future faking cycle, right? And when you're getting future faked, it's just like in a romantic relationship. You're giving false hope. So you're riding off of false hope, right? And we already talked about this. False hope means that false promises have been made, and false promises have been made based upon false evidence. There's no evidence at all that this person is going to change. This man is going to change. There's no evidence at all that this lead pastor is going to change. There's no evidence at all that your supervisor or the CEO, if it's all the way up at the top, is going to change. But you have been given those false promises, right? And then you've developed false hope from that. But then the scripture tells us that hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. So that means after a while, you just end up in a state of languishing from all of this false hope, right, that you've been holding on to has led to a state of languishing at that job, in that small group, at that church. And then you just don't even know what to do with it at that point, right? Because you've been future faked for so long. And it's just like in a romantic relationship, he's like, baby, we're going to get back to the beginning, which the beginning was love bombing, right? That's abuse. Love bombing is when one person worships another person with the intent, soul, and purpose of grooming them for abuse. But you want to go back to the beginning because anything is better than where you are at that particular time, which is the devaluation phase. And it could be the discard too. But usually in the devaluation phase, you're like midway in that. You're thinking that it's like a living hell, so to speak, for you, right? And so you just want to do anything to get out of that position, right? And so what happens is, like I said, in a romantic relationship, baby, all you got to do is change your wardrobe. All you got to do is, kind of get a little lift and a tuck here and there, on the bottom, or lift and tuck here and there on your face, get all your teeth fixed, get all of this stuff done. And you get all of that stuff done and nothing changes. And that's what they're telling you at the churches, making you seem like you're incompetent. That's what they're telling you at the jobs, giving you all of these different lists of things to do. Meanwhile, as they constantly promote other people, right? And that's where, like I said, that's where the cracks in the system is showing, because it's lack of emotional intelligence to tell an adult they're next in line when you see five others in front of you. You understand what I'm saying? So it's playing with your mind as well, and it's playing on your worth. If your worth is wrapped up into that job and or church and or small group, right? And so what happens is that you can end up being in a situation where you got a 20-something-year-old individual. She comes into an organization, right? Nice and bubbly, outgoing, and just full of life, right? And then before it's all over with, within a few months, she is a shell of herself, and she has been perfected, so to speak, for the narcissistic culture. And you might be wondering, well, how does that happen, right? She has allowed the system to remove her identity, to change her name, to train her for not asking for help on tasks where it's definitely like two, three, maybe even five people are needed, right? And she's gaslit herself into saying that line we just talked about. This is a multi-million-dollar company. This is a multi-billion-dollar company, right? This is a mega church. They've saved 30,000 souls or 300,000 souls. So she's trained herself to keep that line in place, right? As a coping mechanism, right? And I should be happy to work here. I should be happy to serve here on this board and that board, that type of thing. So she's trained herself, right? And so what happens is that the only way she can deal with the trauma clutter is going on. Remember, we talked about 3 different ways of dealing with trauma clutter. You either keeping it, which means you're internalizing it, just like you do with regular clutter that's in your house or anywhere else. Okay, so you're either keeping it / internalizing it. You're throwing it away, which means that you're processing it. No, we're not God putting it in the sea of forgiveness. We're processing it and then able to reframe and move on. Okay, number 3 for dealing with trauma clutter would be that we are giving it away. And what I mean giving it away, like I'll say, here's the gift. We're blowing our trauma through other people who do not need and or want it. But this individual has taken on the role of, okay, I've had this to happen to me. I don't know what to do with it. It's all inside. Okay, let me just go and blow it over on you. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. That's, however, what this individual 9 times out of 10 is doing. He or she doesn't know what to do with it. And so their only option in their head is to blow it through somebody else, right? Which means that in turn, you're doing to someone else what was done to you in order to clone you to be a slave. And hopefully I'm making sense, okay? And so what happens is that what the way it looks like in the church is that after a while, you become spiritually empty, right? You become closed-minded, you become stagnant, you're not growing. You've got that sin of certainty as an idol at this point, and you're walking around with your Holy Spirit box. This is the only way that God can move in people's lives, right? You're going around saying that same thing that everybody else in the congregation who's caught up in this toxic narcissistic system are saying, right? And so what happens is that this puts you on a vicious hamster wheel of no return unless you choose to get off the ride. It's like being at a carnival and you screaming out, let me out, let me off, let me off. I can't take it. Let me off of this ride. And then whoever's controlling the ride goes and stops it. and then comes around and finds your spot and lets you off and then starts to ride back up, right? That's how it is once you get on that hamster wheel, that's due to being trauma bonded, right? And then remember, the trauma bonding is one of two ways. Either you are being you're part of the breadcrumbing reward system, gift cards, monies, lunches, dinners, a little bit here and there, right? While you're working like a slave. Or number two, you're future faked. And future faking is based upon false hope, right? And remember, when you're future faked as well, what happens is the way it reinforces the trauma bond is that you're constantly going from the penthouse to the basement to the penthouse, the highs and lows. And so that just seals in that trauma bond, right? Either through the breadcrumb reward system or through the future faking, which is based upon false hope, okay? And the false hope being based upon what? False promises. And the false promises being based upon what? False evidence. You don't have any evidence that things are going to get better, but you just keep hoping and wishing and praying. And you've gotten yourself literally into what the scripture calls a heart-sickened state, right? And so what happens is that, like I said, with this individual, this young lady who was bubbly and all of that, now she's a shell of who she was. And she's going around basically being a flying monkey, unknowingly recruiting other people by blowing her trauma through them, infecting them at work, infecting them at church, right? You see what I'm saying? Because she was able to easily take the bait. She was young and she was able to be molded by it, right? And so when narcissistic systems are in place, there is usually a transition period, believe it or not, that occurs. And that transition period usually occurs when that organization and or church, when they start to have financial problems, that's when the transition occurs. Your ministry hours all of a sudden are cut, right? You're getting paid by the church, all of a sudden your ministry hours are cut and your salary is cut, right? But they expect you to keep on performing like you were before. In the organization / job, your work hours are cut. And even if your salary is not cut, the work hours are cut so insignificantly, but you're expected to keep performing in the same manner you were performing. But in both situations, whether it's ministry at the church or you're in an organization and you're getting paid, and that's where your wages are coming from, you are in a financial crisis. You are in a deficit and you don't know what you're going to do for yourself. And then if you've got a family that you're supporting, you don't know what you're going to do for your family, right? You are in between, as the old folks would say, in between a rock and a hard place, because you don't know what to do, what to turn, right? But with narcissistic systems, what happens is you get in there, right, in that big narcissistic systems, and you get locked in. The transition period is usually a time where you can take a be still and know moment and possibly have a revelation, which I like to call a come to Jesus moment, right? And so what happens is that because you're still expected to perform at the same level, right? But you are not even making money to provide for yourself and or your family, you start to experience burnout is what happens, right? And like I said, this is because you've entered a state of languishing. You've been future faked so long. You thought that you were going to move on to the next level. It's obvious that that's not happening. You expected to keep performing at the level you were performing at. And then at the same time, you are not only expected to keep performing at that level, but you're not even making as much money. You're going in and then you're not having anything to motivate you to keep going, right? That's when burnout sets in, okay? And so what happens is, along with the burnout setting in, you would think that would be the end of it. Oh, no. Then you got the lead pastors and the other people who are reporting to him on the board at the church. And then if it's the job, you've got the lead supervisors and management teams. They're all walking around and they're like ignoring you. They're pretending like you don't even exist. They know what's going on, but because they don't know how to deal with it, their solution is, I don't know how to deal with it, and so I won't deal with it. So they go around there ignoring you. And then what happens is that you start to feel like you're more of, they treat you as if now at this point, you're more of a burden than a servant / employee of the Lord, right? And at the jobs, like you are more of a burden, right, than bringing value to the company, which they undervalued you in the first place. But they go around looking at you, not looking at you, rather ignoring you. And all of this usually change as soon as there's some type of financial uproar, right? And so what happens is, whether it's the job or ministry or any other organization, they are secretly praying that you would just leave. things have gotten to a state, just like with the romantic relationship, right? Things have gotten to a state where you're just feeling uneasy. Nobody's knowing what to do, what to say, and everybody just kind of walking around like, and like I said, the management and the supervisors, they're looking like, I'm not saying anything to those individuals during, the time that things are going on. And then the lead pastor and everybody else on his team and other management at the church, like, we're just going to pretend like those people are not suffering. And they're going back, well, how you doing today? And then you say, oh, I'm okay. Well, you just okay? You're not great. You're not good. Why not great or good? Why do you think the person's not great or good? Their income has been impacted. You understand what I'm saying? And so this is a crucial time where people either do one or two things. You have some that will stay because the future faking has taken on and has latched to their worthiness. So you have some who will stay and still riding off of that false hope that has led to heart sickness, right? Then you have other people that's just like, I just got to get out of here. So not only are the management teams, both at church and at the job, hoping and wishing that you would leave, you are actually hoping that yourself, you've had a come to Jesus moment that you're not going anywhere. You're going to be on that hamster wheel, and the starting point and an ending destination is going to be the same, nowhere, right? And so what happens is that you end up, if you're a strong individual and you've not been able to, and it's not even so much I would say as being a strong individual. If you're an individual that knows your worth, because anybody, whether you're strong or weak, you can get caught up, or if you considered yourself weak or someone else say that you're weak, that don't determine what's going on. Whether you're strong or not, if your identity and worth is caught up into this system, so to speak, you will end up staying there and just riding it out on the hamster wheel, right? And forever being in that cycle. And the individuals who don't have their worth riding on that are able to pull themselves out. And so then you might wonder to yourself, so what happens after that? Well, I'm going to tell you what happens after that is that church and or organization, they bounce back financially. And then when they bounce back financially, what they do is start this cycle all over again. They recruit new slaves for the sweatshop. They send some of the flying monkeys that's already there out to, see if any of their friends want to come and work there. And so the sweatshop just starts right back over again. And so what happens is, whether it's at that church or whether it's at that job, you've got a high turnover rate from that particular ministry, right? From that particular department. You see what I'm saying? Because 9 times out of 10, even though a whole entire company can be toxic, 9 times out of 10, the most toxicity that you're gonna see is going to be in that lower level department, because that's where they are molding you, so to speak, putting you on the assembly line and cloning you before you even get up there. If you get up there, because remember what I said, there's a baked in system. And if you get up there, you got to be guaranteed you're going to pay a price for it. I promise you that, right? And so what happens is that your whole time at this church and or job, you've been on Fantasy Island, right? But as opposed to Fantasy Island, none of your dreams came true. The only thing that came true is that now you've got about 2 to 3 years to try to heal from what has taken place. And you've been trying to figure out, like, man, what ended up happening? I feel like I just got whiplash. You see what I'm saying? You've got all that time now to deal with what has happened and to try to regroup so that you don't have all of that trauma going with you to the next job. And sometimes you have to end up just rolling it over into going there and dealing with it while you're at the next job. Sometimes, you might not even have the luxury of being able to not do that. You see what I'm saying? And so I just want you to remember today that you are enough, and you don't have to remain in a narcissistic system, right? That's going nowhere in order to prove your worth. You don't have to do that. You can reclaim your power, soul, and identity today. You can reclaim the power, soul, and identity of your calling, right? All you got to do is do what? You got to grab your keys to the kingdom, and you got to get your inheritance. Again, I'm Katina Horton, the Love and Freedom Toxic Relationship Recovery Coach. Until next time, God bless to each and every one of you. Love you, ladies.